morning, everyone. Welcome back to the channel where you see all of our successes and our failures. Yesterday was not as productive as I would have hoped, but that's okay. So I have ordered the parts. They'll be here this coming week. So we are going to shift our focus away from the fueling system. And I think today what I want to tackle is getting the Winters Carr shifter connected to my AW4 automatic transmission. And if that goes well, I'll try to tackle something else. So, time lapse.
Since I was going to be working on the interior of the Wrangler today, I decided it was going to be an interesting experience to try taking off the two-piece hardtop by myself. Turned out it was easier than I was thinking it was going to be. With the top off, I then moved some stuff around, removed the driver's seat, and then pushed the Wrangler to the center of the shop. Moving back to the interior of the Wrangler, it was time to reinstall the narrow center aluminum console from GenRight. To do that, I had to remove the twin stick transfer case shifter from JB Custom Fabrications to get the aluminum console into place. Next, I put the plate with the shifter on top of the console, and then I was checking to see how I was going to route the cable. Here I'm starting to reassemble the Winters Carr shifter. With the rails reinstalled on the Winters Carr shifter, I then turned my focus onto attaching the cable onto the shifter. There really isn't a trick to doing this other than taking your time and making sure you have everything lined up correctly. I was having problems securing the cable to the shifter, so I decided to undo the fasteners and flip them so I'd have access to the Allen head on top of the bolt. With the cable secured to the shifter, it was time to test fit it in the Wrangler. I realized really quickly that if I clocked where the cable was coming into the shifter, I'd have an easy way of routing the cable to the transmission. To rotate where the cable was connected to the shifter, you have to remove the frame rail that's holding the cable to the shifter, and then you have to remove the hardware that's holding the cable to the cable selector plates. Once everything has been moved, it's just a simple process of reassembling the shifter. Admittedly, I did struggle with the cotter pin here a little bit. With the cotter pin figured out, I re-threaded the cable to the shifter and reinstalled the rails to the shifter as well. With the shifter fully assembled, I then threaded the cable around the transmission and the transfer case to come up along the side of the transmission to hit the selector shaft on the side of the AW4 automatic. With the cable routed the way I wanted it, I then turned my attention to replacing the linkage arm on the AW4 automatic with the one that came with the Winters Carr shifter. With the linkage arm installed, the next challenge was figuring out how I was going to mount the cable to the AW4 automatic transmission. What you can't really see very well with the video is that the bracket interferes with the skid plate that I installed on the AW4. Also, the bolt holes weren't lining up. I was going to have to mount that bracket further forward, but then the cable wasn't going to catch on it correctly. Ultimately, I decided the best thing to do was to remove the skid plate, cut the bracket, re-weld it, and permanently mount it to the AW4 skid plate. So what I'm doing is actually cutting one of the tabs off so I can re-weld it to the bracket so I can secure that bracket to the skid plate and the transmission pan at the same time. It's difficult to see because how far away the camera is, but I was actually using a small magnet to hold the bracket together so I could weld the tab where I wanted it on the bracket itself. Here I'm welding the tab back to the bracket, making sure that I put a lot of weld on it so I don't have to worry about it breaking in the future. With the bracket welded, I then check it on the skid plate. With everything looking good, I then use one of my favorite tools, the center punch, and then I drill a hole into the skid plate so I can mount the bracket to the side of the skid plate. What I didn't actually think about was the head of the bolt interfering with the pan. I ended up having to take it back off because I couldn't get the skid plate to mount flush against the AW4. To solve this, I just got another bolt, took it to my bench grinder and grinded the head down to about half of its normal height. With the new bolt made, I secure it to the skid plate and reinstalled the skid plate on the AW4 automatic transmission. With the bracket installed and in place, it was time to attach the cable to the bracket. With the cable secured to the transmission, I then needed to secure the top plate of the GenRight narrow aluminum center console. Securing the linkage arm. And with everything in place, I then test to make sure the Winters Carr shifter has full range of motion on the AW4 automatic transmission. With the shifter installed and working, I then decided it was time to mount the GenRight narrow aluminum center console to the tub of the Wrangler. I was able to drill one hole in the tub, but I ended up having to remove the bracket that holds the emergency brake cable so I could drill the other hole. I then used a stepper bit to enlarge the holes to the correct size for the nut cert. With both holes the correct size, I used my nut cert tool to install the nut certs into the tub. Next, I reinstalled the mounting bracket onto the aluminum center console, and then secure the GenRight aluminum center console to the tub of the Wrangler. With the console secured, I then re-secure the bracket for the emergency brake cable. Next, I reinstalled the twin stick transfer case shifters from JB Custom Fabrications. I'm not sure how, but somehow I lost the footage where I realized I needed to drill a hole into one of the brackets on the GenRight narrow aluminum center console. I'm doing this so that I can route the transfer case shifter cable through the front of the tub and then down and around back towards the transfer case. I then installed a rubber grommet into the aluminum plate so I wouldn't damage the shifter cable. With everything in place, I then went to reinstall the plate into the GenRight narrow aluminum center console. Unfortunately, what I hadn't realized to check was that I had drilled the hole low enough to avoid the HVAC vent tubes that were behind the dashboard. As soon as I finished mounting all this, I quickly realized that I was going to have to drill another hole that was a little bit lower so I could get the cable to the firewall. And I'm taking everything back apart again so I can drill that hole just a little bit lower. This is really why you should measure twice and cut once. So do as I say, not as I do. With the lower hole drilled out, I then reinstalled the rubber grommet to protect the shifter cable. With everything in place, I then reinstall the plate on the GenRight narrow aluminum center console. With the center console reassembled, I then worked on feeding the shifter cable through the firewall where the automatic transmission shifter cable used to go. The rubber grommet that was in the firewall was a little bit too small, but nothing that a pair of cutters wasn't able to fix.
Okay guys, that's all I've got for this video. Turns out the cables I have for the doubler and the transfer case are not going to be long enough. They might be long enough if I ran them a different route, but you're only supposed to bend the cable so much, and coming out the front and going down and around is the best option I have right now. But we have the shifter hooked up, so I can move it from park to reverse to neutral to drive to 2 to 1. So that's actually a major success. So if we do get the engine running, I know for certain that the whole thing is in park, which is really awesome. So anyway, leave a comment down below, give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. If you didn't, you know what to do. And hey, if you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing. And if you have, as always, thank you, and I'll see you in the next video very soon. Goodbye.